Welcome, fellow horror hounds, and welcome to the latest episode of Talk and Stalk, your unholy home for horror. I'm your host, as always, Barry, and today's podcast is devoted to a little slasher movie released in '83 called The Prey. Now, this was actually a first-time watch for me. I actually watched this very recently. I've actually known of this film's existence for quite some time. I've just never actually got round to watching it. I know some people that actually really like this film. I know some other people that absolutely hate it. So I went into this film with kind of pretty low expectations. You know, I've seen a hell of a lot of slasher films over the years. This is just one that I've never actually got around to watching. This film was actually filmed in 1979, but actually not released until '83, a whole 4 years later. There's people out there that would probably call this a Friday the 13th ripoff, if you will. But this was actually being filmed in the very same year as Friday the 13th. Now, I'm just going to, get the ball rolling and just say that I wasn't really keen on this. I didn't hate it. Hate's a really strong word. I've certainly seen worse slasher films, but I've seen a hell of a lot better as well. This was actually released very much during the golden age of slasher films where they're being churned out left, right and centre. But it was actually filmed, like I said, in '79, before you could say the slasher genre was even kind of fully formed at that point. You know, in '79, we had, When a Stranger Calls came out that year. Halloween was released the year before it. We had Tourist Trap in '79. But in '79, there wasn't actually a huge amount of slasher films actually out at the time. And I believe this was actually directed by Edwin Scott Brown, who actually co-wrote the film with his wife. And from what I understand, is that Essex Productions, the company that actually put this out, actually specialised in adult films, i.e. porn. And this was actually their very first non-pornographic movie. So quite a contrast to their previous films, I'd imagine. So it must have felt a bit weird because there's very little in the way of actual sexual content in this film. You know, there's kissing here and there and, there's characters kind of getting it on, but there's nothing really what you'd deem to be pornographic in this movie. Now, I know one of the big criticisms with this film is the pacing. This is a very slow-paced slasher movie. I mean, I've got no problem with slow burn movies and all that, as long as the payoff is good. And certainly in the final act, the film picks up the pace somewhat. The gore that does happen is actually pretty good. The deaths are kind of few and far between in that. Like I said, this film is very leisurely paced. Which I don't really have a massive issue with. I will say that I really do like the setting to this film, that I believe it was shot in Idleworld. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, in California. I think the setting is absolutely beautiful. I do think they make great use of the setting in this film. And I believe they wanted to shoot in Colorado, where it's actually set, but I think they were unable to afford the production costs. So it was actually filmed in California instead. But as I say, beautiful setting. And I think, when it was released, certainly when it was filmed in '79, these kind of great outdoors slasher movies were almost kind of unheard of. It was very rare for a horror movie to be kind of set in that location. All of the characters in this film, they're all nondescript, really. There's no character really aside from maybe the park ranger, if you will. There's no characters that really kind of stand out in this movie. At the end of the day, the characters are there to be killed, etc. Anyway, there's one blonde girl that kind of, in nearly every scene she's like doing her makeup and all this and that, and I'm like, I don't know if she thinks she's going for a fashion shoot or what, but she's definitely in the wrong location and that, certainly, unless she's, I don't know, looking to pull a bear or something, but, which actually makes me laugh. One of the girls in the movie, she gets told to watch out for bears, and like, she's got this shocked expression. Bears? I mean, you're in the wilds. I mean, I'd understand you being shocked, you know, if you're in the middle of the desert or something, but I'd kind of be shocked if there wasn't bears in that kind of location. The same character as well, I believe. There's actually a scene that did kind of make me laugh. The character jumps out at her. I believe it's her boyfriend, one of the male characters, and she actually faints. I'm like, oh God, she's not going to last long in this movie, is she? But funnily enough, when she does actually see the killer, she doesn't faint or whatever. So, yeah. With this film, again, another major criticism from a lot of people. And this was very evident very early on in the film. There's a lot of shots of nature. There are a lot of shots of nature in this film. Now, I absolutely love nature. I'm a huge fan of the works of David Attenborough, who I think is very much a British institution, Batman. That man's career spans decades of, animal documentaries, etc. But if I want to watch animal documentaries and see animals, I'll stick on an animal documentary. It kind of it felt like we were just seeing shot of animal after animal after animal, which, it wasn't too jarring. It was just something that was very apparent, and I believe a high percentage of the shots were in fact stock footage actually used to basically kind of fill the running time, if you will. It was something that was almost impossible not to notice. But yeah, there's quite a lot of shots of animals. We get snakes, we get raccoons, we get, I think, an owl on a couple of occasions, etc. It did actually feel like I was watching, a couple of points in the film, I actually felt like I was watching a nature documentary, and I had to kind of remind myself that I'm actually watching a slasher film. As I said, I absolutely love nature. I've been watching nature documentaries for years. It just felt kind of weird seeing all of these nature shots in what is effectively a slasher movie. It's almost like they were constantly trying to remind us that, that we're in the great outdoors. I get it. I already know that, But yeah, as I said, it's not like a major gripe or anything like that. But I know some people that were really put off with that fact. As I said, I think it was really there to kind of pad the runtime. Now, I think this film kind of started quite strongly, actually. We quickly learned that, quite early on in the film, we learned that there was a fire, and, many people were burnt to death, and a child was found horribly burned. Obviously, we know that's the killer. The fact that you actually see very little of the killer in this movie as well. Not until the end of the movie, and very kind of like Jason Voorhees-esque almost. My eyesight isn't great, so when I first looked at him, I thought, hang on a sec, is that the Toxic Avenger? But it also apparent as well that the killer was very tall as well. I believe they actually hired a Dutch actor who was actually 7 foot. So they actually wanted somebody, with a real physical presence, a real kind of imposing presence in that. It starts off well. I mean, like I said, with the gore effect, the decapitation, which I thought was pretty cool. I thought that was a pretty cool death. And then the next death, we just, we see the man actually being, the woman actually being hacked. The killer actually sets a trap that we actually see a little earlier on in the film. One character gets his throat ripped out, and, that's a pretty cool. The gore effects are quite good, actually. I just don't feel like this film, as I said, the pacing issues, it just felt like it was a little bit too laboursome in places, but it's not that I actually felt bored or anything, but I felt like it was a film that could have done a little more. I felt like it could have actually done a little more. Now, I believe there was actually the version I watched was actually on the Arrow streaming service, and I believe there's, the home video release, be it Blu-ray, I'm assuming. There's actually added scenes, I believe. I'm not sure if some of the nature scenes are actually cut from the film, but I think there's actually a large kind of flashback sequence actually showing you kind of the origin of the killer and that. Now, the end of the movie, He's just looking for a mate, you know. Even burnt psychopaths need a bit of love, and he's carried away, and it ends with this shot of the cave where presumably this is where he's been living, and we hear a baby cry. So obviously he's got her pregnant, and yeah, the deputy in this film, the park ranger, if you will. Um, when I first saw him, I don't know, he had like this kind of crazed look on his face. I don't know, he just had this constant kind of grin, and I think, the guy was a bit lonely. There's a scene in the film that actually did kind of make me cringe. I do believe it was actually ad-libbed as well. Actually improvised, where he's actually telling a joke that was kind of cringe-worthy to... I'm actually trying to remember what animal it was now. I think it was a deer. Yeah, a baby deer. He actually tells a joke. And Jackie Coogan's in this film. Jackie Coogan's last film role. Jackie Coogan, probably most well known for being a child actor, but did actually go on to star in the 60s Addams Family TV series as Uncle Fester. I'm a big Addams Family fan, by the way. I love the 1991 film and Addams Family Values in '93 and the old 60s TV series. So yeah, this was actually Jackie Coogan's very last film role. I mean, he really doesn't have much to do in the film. There's kind of a couple of scenes, interactions with the deputy. There's just a lot of scenes of kind of nothingness I felt in this film. And I feel bad for saying that, because I know there's people out there that really like this film, and if people really like it, that's entirely up to them. I'm never going to try and change someone else's opinion. We've all got our own view. If we all like the same things in life, the world would be a boring place. So I can appreciate anyone's like for this movie. It's just not really a film that clicked for me. There was like some really odd decisions in the film. Like, I'm not sure if it was trying to be artistic. Again, I think maybe I don't know if the porn aesthetics were kind of creeping into it. There's a scene towards the end where two of the girls are running away and it goes into slow-mo. And then it goes into, normal speed, and then in slow-mo again, normal speed, slow-mo. It just kind of felt like a really odd decision to do that. And, there was a scene around the campfire that just seemed to kind of go on forever. And that's where we actually get loads of animal shots, basically I think the majority of which was as I said, stock footage, where they're sitting around the campfire. And it's just kind of a scene that just seems to go on for almost eternity. But then we get this kind of the monkey's paw story, which I believe was actually sacrificed in the other version of the movie, for the flashback sequence, which I probably would have been more intrigued, more interested in actually seeing. But I think the best death of the movie is the first one, the first death, the decapitation. I actually think that's the best kill of the movie. It's another pretty cool kill, as is often the case in these kind of films. The killer's practically kind of superhuman, and the guy gets his head twisted round, and that was pretty cool. But there's other of these kind of films I prefer. I prefer Madman. Just Before Dawn, I think, is one of the very best films of its kind. As I said, Madman's a little underrated. I know it has a fan base and all that, but I think The Prey was okay. It was okay, but I think, to be honest, because people have kind of been hyping it for me and stuff, I don't know, I tried to keep my expectations quite low, but at the same time, I suppose there was a certain degree within me that was kind of expecting just a little bit more from it. Not that I think it's one of the worst slasher films ever made or anything like that. I'm glad I watched. As I say, I think this film's setting is great. I absolutely love the setting. The cinematography, it really is beautiful. I love looking at the landscape in these kind of films. I do feel like, as much as I love nature, I do feel like there was too much animal footage in the film, but I understand why it was there. They were just trying to pad out the runtime. But it just felt weird. It felt weird. As I said, I if I want to see all that, I'll watch an animal documentary. I'll stick on a David Attenborough DVD or something. But overall, I think The Prey, it's probably not a slasher flick that I'm going to be returning to. if I'm honest. As I said, I know there are people out there that like it, and fair play. If you like this film, that's cool. It's just not really a slasher film that I was particularly keen on. I think that I think the pacing was kind of one of the issues, but at the same time, I'm not somebody that needs a high body count. I love Halloween. Halloween's one of my all-time favourite slasher movies. That film has by no means a high body count. Michael Myers actually spends the majority of the movie stalking his victims, but it's obviously directed with a lot of finesse. I think Halloween's such a simple film, but a very well-made movie for what it is. And I can't actually recall as to what the budget to this movie was, but as I said, the gore effects, when they happen, they're quite good. They are quite good. But just, again, even in slasher films, there's usually, to me, at least one or two characters that kind of stand out. Even in a Friday the 13th movie, you know, in most of the Friday the 13th films, there's usually at least one character that will kind of stand out to me, whether they're annoying or whether they're, you know, they just happen to be funny or likeable. But this film really didn't have that for me. There was no characters in there that really kind of jumped out at me, aside from the deputy, maybe. Aside from the deputy, but then again, just, yeah. So, yeah, that's really all I really want to talk about regarding The Prey. It's not that I think it's a really bad film. It's just a slasher film that, to me, does nothing to really stand out. It's just one of them that kind of, you know, it doesn't stand out. It's one of them that just kind of like just follows the motions, if you will. And as I said, I've seen other kind of great outdoor slasher movies and that I do actually prefer to this film. But yeah, so that's all I really want to say on The Prey. If you've liked what you've heard, please feel free to subscribe to my channel. And I'll be back again soon to haunt you and torment you. Take care.